there's the Louis Simmons thought process where you're only as strong as your weakest link. But then there's also the train to your strengths thought process, right? Where what quality it makes this guy great, and let's lean into that, right? Do you find yourself being more of a middle guy, or do you find yourself leaning one way?
My first assessment is what kind of mover are they? I kind of do an immediate dichotomy. Are they more muscular driven or elastic driven?
Hmm.
So that's my first separator. So if they're more elastic driven, I'm going to be a little bit hesitant to really load them with absolute strength and max strength because I've made that mistake and it's destroyed their ability to move. So I think there's a trend in the NFL. I don't know what you're seeing, but the skill guys like the wide receivers and the cornerbacks and whatnot, we're not seeing those guys lift like they did 10 years ago.
Hmm.
I mentor three pretty good cornerbacks in the league right now. They don't lift.
Hmm.
They do rehab lifting, but they're not in the weight room trying to get stronger.
Yeah, what I've seen, it depends on the organization. It's almost always org specific. The guys that do stuff like that are usually a little bit more ahead of the curve with the things, but it's also too. It depends how new the guys are. So there's a lot that goes into that. Um,
Yeah, and you know how much blow you got in controlling your program. These got three guys
yeah,
I've got, they've been in
yeah.
the league 10 years.
Yes, precisely. Like when I have guys that are in the league 10 years or even 6 years and above, the coaches know leave them the fuck alone. And they do what they got to do.
Or work in the NBA space. I mean, so one of my guys, his travel schedule was Seattle, Miami, New York, Chicago, Dallas, LA, and then back to San Antonio in about 10 days. He's like, where do I get my lift in? I said, we don't.
So this is where I have a little bit of a different view on that. I think the microdosing of the lifts is super important for these guys. Where post game, you do a GPP circuit, and that's what you do. You have a thorough warm up pre-game, and then your post game
Yeah.
GPP, which none of them are going to fucking do, but that's what you should do.
Well, yeah, when you leave the arena at 1 a.m. and you land at 5 a.m. and you got
Mm-hmm.
to shoot around at 11 a.m., you got to pick your poisons, right?
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Abs- Absolutely. I have.
So with this guy, we know that he can weather about 10 days of not being in the weight room without a serious decay. So, I don't lose a lot of sleep over that.
Is he young or is he
Basically,
young or old?
he's 32.
This is your NBA guy, or is this your
Yeah,
okay?
NBA guy. So, but if we have a good week, say he's at home and the travel's not insane, we'll try to get two lifts in. One is kind of a loading type workout, and the other is a tread water workout.
Mhm.
We might get 10 of those a season. The rest of the time, we're kind of cycling a load workout into a tread water workout from week to week.
6 months. It's 82 games, right? 10 good workouts. And I shouldn't say good workouts, but 10 like heavy workouts.
Well, I think people lose sight of the end game here. Like my job is to keep him on the court.
100%. 100%.
So making him a little bit stronger isn't going to keep him on the court.
Nope.
So probably half of our lifts are return to play lifts, like tendon remodeling, stuff like that. He has a tendency to lose pelvic control as the season goes on. So, we do a lot of motor unit enhancement, like hex bar deadlift work, things like that during the season. but it's truly assessment of what this guy needs to stay on the court.
Hmm. So,
So I think this is a good topic. Most of our training in performance is wearing the developmental hat.
yes.
In elite pro sport, it's a management hat.
100%.
And we don't realize how powerful our training is, our research, our mentorships, our influencers, and this developmental mindset drives the bus when we really should be in a triage
Hmm.
or in a management mindset. So I look at my work in the leagues during the season as triage.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's so I've had several super elite athletes at different sports. And I mean, you gotta check your ego to think that you're gonna make this guy better. Like a genuinely super elite athlete. Like, what are you gonna do to make this guy better than the future Hall of Famer that he already is? It's
Well,
keeping him on the court, letting him find a way to express his best him as frequently as possible.
I'm a history buff, and a lot of my research is historical in programming and sports medicine and rehab and whatnot. I go back centuries. What were they doing? I think a lot of young coaches don't realize strength and conditioning is really a young profession. Baseball players, track and field athletes, golfers, tennis players weren't lifting in the 60s and the
Mhm.
70s and the 80s. It's a relatively recent phenomenon. And there were some pretty good athletes in those decades.
Yeah, smoking cigarettes, eating hot dogs, and crushing.
So and sometimes I step back and say, have we really moved the ball forward with our industry? Like in the 90s in football, it was like get bigger, get faster, get stronger, and all of this. And, guys would slow down every year in university because they got bigger and stronger, but they didn't get faster.
Yeah.
And, we go down rabbit holes, like this Nordic hamstring garbage. And like the advantage of being in this industry 52 years, I've seen a lot of magic bullets that weren't magic bullets. I mean, Paul check training and wobble boards and Swiss balls and Nautilus and isokinetics and, now isometrics is making a big turn, for in the 60s, isometric was really popular in a lot of sporting eras, and then it kind of fell apart. And now all of a sudden, you can't go a week without reading some article on isometric training. So the wheel turns.
Talk to me a little bit about your thoughts on Nordic training. I want to hear because I have similar thoughts, but I want to hear someone pretty intelligent talk about it.
Well, first got introduced to this when I was in the UK running the training center there in London before the Olympics. And it was a lot of the rugby teams and football clubs were doing a lot of research and driven by a lot of Australian research out of their institute in Canberra. And I consulted with three or four footballers, and I'd go in and I'd look at the protocols. And the teams that were reducing hamstring injuries were doing a lot of good stuff other than Nordics. They were doing high speed running, they were doing upright running, they were doing change in direction work. They had a big portfolio. And I'm like, how can they all put this on Nordic hamstrings when they're doing so many other good things? So step back, everybody's gone down the rabbit hole now for about 15 years. Is it really changing the incidence of hamstring injuries? The data says no in any league in the world. So I'm just going to be a tough devil's advocate here. As I understand a Nordic hamstring exercise, it's a slow single joint eccentric. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah.
But hamstrings are a two joint muscle.
Hmm.
You're not moving through space, you're stationary. Hamstring injuries occur translating through space. So it kind of fails the logic test on those two fronts. One, you're stationary. Two, it's a single joint, slow isometric. And then you drill down into the etiology of hamstring injuries. Upper hamstring injuries often occur from over pushing horizontally or with really bad pelvic positions at toe off,
Hmm.
where the lower hamstring injuries are usually about shank control. The shank gets away from them, it misfires, touchdown distance is too great, plantar flexion is too early, yada, yada, yada. So I don't see how a stationary slow eccentric is going to affect the motor behavior of the drivers that we see in these injuries.
Hmm.
So, probably they hang their hat on this fascicle length idea. And I've had two sprinters sub 10 that have probably the shortest fascicles you'd ever see. And they were relatively healthy.
Yeah.
And they ran under 10 seconds. Well, yeah, case study of two, but uh, I I just don't get it. Like I don't use it. It's my bias. I don't, when I look at the ROI on it, I'm not sold.
So let me show you this video. This is a video of me back, it says over 15 years ago. You see that? Those are natural Nordic hamstring curls. That's me banging out 10 of them in a row, right? That year, I had hammy issues that for no reason whatsoever, I just kept feeling it in my right hamstring. I was able to do glute ham raises with a 45-pound plate for like 20 reps. You saw those natural glute ham raises or like what they'd call Nordics now, and I'm just repping them out at the end of a workout. But for some reason, my hammy still bothered me. And that video was from, I think, when I was in college. And after that, I was like, well, it doesn't seem like this glute and that's just an N of one. You know what I mean? Like case study of one. But like, I don't know anyone that I train that can do that shit. So clearly, to be the strongest glute ham raise guy or the strongest Nordic guy, my hammy didn't feel great. That wasn't the be all end all. Maybe there's one aspect of hamstring pulls that could possibly address, but the blanket hamstring health, like you said, two joint muscle, there's three parts to it. You have the high, the mid, and the low. And then you also have the aspect where it interacts with the gastroc as well. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
there's so
Well,
much to it.
the elephant in the room is people are not doing hardware assessments. So if you got a sacrum that's not nutating, or you got an ilium that's biased to anteversion neutral and not going retroversion, or you got an upslip on the fibular head, or you got a medial collapse of the talus, you can weight train till your nose bleeds and you're not going to overcome those hardware issues.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So every elite sprinter has asymmetry in stride length. The average is around 10 centimeters. So that's the bandwidth. We know when a stride length asymmetry gets out to 15 to 20 centimeters, the risk of hamstring injury on that side increases exponentially. Why? How are they getting that increased length? They're over pushing and they're probably having greater touchdown distance. So they've elongated the stride. And so now they're taking joint segments through ranges they're not designed to.
Hmm.
So this is what drives me crazy with PTs and ATCs. They're analyzing the shit out of muscle environments, muscle tension and whatnot, but they're not looking at the joint dynamics.
Hmm.
And if the joint is restricted or immobile, so a lot of our guys, stance and whatnot, have huge external rotation of one foot versus the other. Well, now you got rotational shear strain on that hamstring. Say they're biased to anteversion big lordosis when they're standing or whatnot. So now they got a tilted pelvis with rotational shear strain all day long on that hamstring group. It's a time bomb.
Yeah. So let me go into more hamstring stuff. I had a guy come in talking about how his ATC was able to feel the hamstring hanging on by a thread at the origin. Right? He said, "Oh, I feel the tear." Have you ever been able to feel a tear in the tendon on like the like, at any point? Have you ever been able to feel muscle belly? Sure, but feel the actual tendon tear?
Mm. I can't say I have, no.
Yeah, it's there. There are some people
Like
I
I can feel tendon damage, because of edema and fluid, but
sure.
yeah.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, it's the hamstring. I think a lot of the issues that we deal with stem from the wrong understanding of what it is that we're seeing, feeling. Like it's we're looking at it from the wrong angle because if I genuinely feel like I can feel that tear, then I can definitely suspect. I can definitely see other shit, and it's just I don't know. And how would you address that tear? Even you address it by slow eccentrics. Like, is that what you're doing? You're doing slow eccentrics to fix slow eccentrics on knee flexion, no less, to fix a proximal hamstring tendon tear, right? Like, it doesn't add up to me. It doesn't add up.
I think Keith Barr's done some really good work on tendon remodeling, about the use of isometrics, yielding and overcoming and duration of isometrics and protocols and what have you. And can't refute his radiology evidence that you can affect remodeling of a tendon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a big leap thing, but therefore you can affect remodeling of a ligament. But we know there's no remodeling of a torn cartilage yet,
Really?
without surgical intervention.
Hmm.
And we know that capsule remodeling, so like the capsule of the knee or the capsule of the shoulder, we have no clue on how to return fluid dynamics within the capsule or repair, the layering of the collagen matrix of a capsule. Again, that's something we don't know about. So seldom is an injury one driver. So usually if you tear an origin of a hamstring or an adductor, you've affected the tendon, the aponeurosis. You've probably affected all the fascial slings that tie into that area. You've affected the fluid dynamics within that construct. There's a lot of variables that you've affected. And to think that you can have one protocol that's going to address all those variables kind of defies the logic bus to me.
Mm-hmm. So it's funny that you mentioned the capsule and how we have no idea. Years ago, they used to increase shoulder stability, they used to do a capsular shrink, and they don't do that anymore. So I was one of the guys my freshman year of high school. I think it was like 2000 or something like that. Tore my shoulder, which ended up retrospect, like later on down the road now, like we know I didn't need to do that because it was a labral tear, but it was a slap tear, and I was a baseball player, and you kind of sort of need a slap tear in order to throw hard. But you live and learn. So what did they do? They repaired that and they tightened my capsule to increase stability and decrease range of motion. And I was a good baseball player growing up for a year and a half. I threw like that. It took 2.5 years to actually get it going. And one of the things that I had to do in order to free that capsule up, it wasn't just this single range of motion. I was a middle infielder. So I had to learn how to throw from every single angle possible. And then slowly it was able to, I suppose, remodel. We don't have any imaging of it, but I was able to throw hard again. My senior year of college, guess what tore? Posterior capsule. So it's like, yeah, we could remodel, but and it tore on a throw during infield outfield, the first throw of the season. Why? What was the give?
Yeah, I think surgeons trying to do good work with good intent. So sheath release was a phenomena, in the 80s and 90s, lower leg sheath release. And my para guy actually lost his leg through these surgeries. They got infected. He had meningitis and then an amputation. 12 surgeries later, they have amputation, all starting with, quote, a sheath release. And I probably oversaw 3 or 4 dozen of those, and none of them worked. Not one.
Hold on, let's just cut some shit.
Well, and surgeons, they're pretty careful about not nicking a major vein or artery or a major nerve, but fascia and peripheral nerves, it's just like, let's go.
My mom had a hip replacement. My mom's had 5 hip replacements, and I tell people, as you want to get surgery, if you want to get more surgeries, get one surgery, because surgery begets surgery begets surgery. And one of the things they did first, they gave her the wrong size hip years ago, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong because it was early on in hip replacements. They ended up doing a release, an adductor release. And I said, oh, so I'm young. I'm 8th grade at this time. I don't know anything. Years later, I ask, hey, what's an adductor release or what a hip flexor release, whatever they say. Oh, we just cut it. I said, well, where's it go? It just goes. We just cut it.
It retracts.
I, I said, so your 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 idea to repair was to destroy. Got it.
Well, we got hernia surgeons that cut the inguinal nerve.
Get out of here.
Well, it gets rid of the pain. Now, there's a top surgeon, a lot of guys in the league go see on the East Coast, and his gig is he cuts the inguinal nerve. It's funny. Naval literally in one of his podcasts that he was just on, he just talked about this. He goes, they asked, what do you think is going to be the, top 5 oh shits, like we really messed this up. He goes, oh, modern medicine. He says, we think the answer to fixing a gallbladder is to cut it out. Fixing an appendix, tonsils, cut them out. He said, we're missing the boat. And sure, he said, modern day surgery is just, well, let's just cut shit out. I mean, there are times when I see it, like, a torn Achilles, you got to repair it, right?
Yeah.
I had an interesting case study going into Paris, German heptathlete, partial tear of the ACL, javelin accident, knee hyperextended, yada, yada, yada. And we were on a timeline. It was 9 months to the Olympics. So if we have the surgery, the dream's dead, right? So her and her coach go like, that's how I got involved. Like, how could we manage this conservatively? And she was a high-ranked athlete. She had great medical support, really good therapist. Coach really understood what to do, and we were very progressive on mastering a certain ability before we go on to another ability. And what happened. Long story short, she made it to the Olympics, best score of her life. And then the radiology post-Olympics showed about 90% repair.
Look at that. There is so much we don't know. I had a teammate in college, tore his ACL in high school. It was baseball. What do you need an ACL for? So he didn't repair it. And I'll tell you what, he had an incredible first half of his college career. Then he said, knee's sort of kind of bothering me. Let me get it repaired. Fell right off. Right off. Nothing ever feels the same, like it's I,
Well, sadly, I think a lot of people are in the dark on how to return to play and return to perform from tendon injuries.
Mhm.
So there's just a lot of gaps. I do a lot of gap analysis. So surgery, immediate PT and rehab, and then a hands off to an ATC, then a hands off to the S&C guy, and then a hands off to the sport coach. And a lot of times people don't know what's going on or what has gone on or whatnot. They're not communicating. They just kind of work their space. And it's my idea you got to build bridges along the way. I'm big into progressions and mastery of certain movements and stressors before you evolve. And a lot of times we're just throwing these people in the deep end of the curve. So I do a lot of auditing in various sporting agencies. And most of the re-injury is occurring between where the S&C hands off to the sport coach and the sport coach introduces games. That's where the re-injury occurs because there hasn't been bridges built there for the stressors.
Mhm.
So doing cone drills and serpentine runs and whatnot, okay, that has a place, but that doesn't mean you're game ready.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I have tons of ACL rehabs every year, and the return to play, hey, am I ready? That's all right. Well, let's go to practice first. And you go to practice at a walkthrough speed. We go 20%, 30, and we every 2 weeks we increase by 10%. And then finally, after 10 weeks time, whatever it is, you're at 100%. And that's the slow integration but you're not going live right away. I'll tell you what, we had an ACL rehab and the exit interview. Doctor said, all right, we're 12 months out. You're good to go. No test by the PTs, nothing. Well, good to go wasn't me. You're cleared. Go play.
So a good friend of mine, Dr. Matt Jordan in Calgary, is probably the guy that's done more tendon rehab than anybody in North America and probably done more force platform data collection in this journey than anybody in North America. And his data shows that you're never truly out of jail on an ACL that's been well managed for 2 years.
Yep.
Doesn't mean you can't practice, play, or whatever, but you need to be cautious and you need to assess on a regular basis. And force platform data is just one layer, then kinematic data would be another layer. Like, are they may be producing really good outputs, but are they compensating to do that? So I think there's probably too great a confidence in some of our data collection in determining this return to play.
Well, also the timing of the data collection. Talk to me in the beginning of the session. Cool. What about the end of the session? And it's the same thing with, I've noticed the same thing with body work and different therapists, different manual therapists. All right, hop off the table. All right, hips are good. Muscles firing. Everything's good. The person goes for a walk and comes back. They come back on the table. Things aren't how they used to be, just a basic walk. Well, how about a jog? How about this? And same thing with the ACLs. You go through, you start the workout. We do a single leg jump, double leg jump. Hey, data looks great. Go through the entire workout. Go through a ton of fatigue. Then talk to me about what the asymmetries actually look like. And that's what the game is. It's how you're responding to that fatigue.
Yep.